Welcome to exclusive episode 3 of The Bottom Line. In this exclusive episode, we are going to focus on tax season. Since it is tax season for the several weeks going forward, we're going to drop weekly exclusive episodes on taxes and certain topics of interest in taxes for you guys to learn more. So without further ado, I'm going to throw it over to Deepak.
Yeah, thanks, Syed, and I'm happy to present these exclusive tax series to our audience. I felt that one of the best ways to kickstart this exclusive web series is to actually bring on our second special guest host. It's actually no other than my brother, Saurab Mehta, who actually is running his own CPA accounting firm. It's a non-for-profit with a goal of helping serve underserviced markets. So with that being said, I'm going to bring Saurab back onto the screen and let's hear from Saurab.
Thanks, gentlemen, for having me on today. It's an absolute pleasure to connect with the audience virtually. Under normal circumstances, we would be either getting together in a hall or a meeting and shaking hands and throwing high fives. So I guess virtual it is for now, and hopefully the new normal won't be around that much longer. But yes, absolutely, to your point, it is tax season, and what that means for everyone is there's a lot of changes that's gone on since the onset of COVID, and whether that means you've been taking government assistance, receiving government subsidies, rents, wage subsidies, the works. And in addition to the government's involvement in our finances since last year, what's really transpired in this period of time is individuals have been severely impacted, whether it's someone that you know because of COVID, indirectly because of COVID, businesses have been impacted. And what this really means is that now more than ever, people need clarity on taxes. Okay, so what does this mean? And when there's so much complexity, you have to turn over to professionals who've spent a large amount of time and resources trying to study these elements and ensuring that we're here to help you make those guided decisions that sometimes become very esoteric for people to understand. So this is why I've decided this tax season that I'm going to try to reach out to as many people as possible and do a massive outreach and obviously connect with your audiences to touch base and let them know that we're here to support them. And how can we really support them? Well, this year, because of the impact of COVID, what I've decided to do is I've decided to offer my services for absolutely free for a vast majority of the population, whether you're a student, whether you're currently unemployed, receiving government subsidies. Give us a call. We'll file your taxes. We're also programming and partnering with the government this year for the free tax clinics. And what that'll do is that'll allow me to really outreach to the underserved markets that sometimes gets neglected here in the GTA. And what that means to you is you get expert advice, someone who's a professional on your side, who's a trusted advisor, and you don't have to worry about coming up with exuberant amount of fees that lawyers are sometimes notorious for charging. And that's my way to actually give back to the community. We're very fortunate to have very good careers and great education. And really, what can you do with that to help and better society and move society forward? I will provide information to both of you that you can put into your link as a description. And it's very easy and simplified for you to reach out to us, get your tax compliances. If you haven't filed last year, don't worry about it. Reach out to us. We'll figure it out. One phone call and we'll sort out all your matters. If it's more complicated of a help that you need from a tax standpoint, shoot us an email. We'll get back to you with a layered process involved and how we're going to help navigate even a little bit more complex situation in case you have rental income, if you have any capital gains that you haven't filed. And if all these verbiages don't mean anything to you and they're not clicking with you, then you really don't have to worry about any of these elements. But if this sounds familiar, then you know what? Let's have that discussion. Let's jump on a WebEx call and let's see how we can help you. No cost to you, definitely free, definitely here to help. And if there's anything we can do to help, my team and I will do our best to ensure that you get your fair share of government subsidies, government support, knowing that in times like this, it's really the underserved markets that sometimes get left out and get left on the sidelines while individuals who have the resources continue to get the help and extrapolate the most out of government support and government subsidies. So that's really about what our firm is going to do this tax season. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'll just open it up to both of you to see if you have any questions for me. And really, we can take this unscripted, of course. And if you have any burning questions, that I'll be happy to help and happy to answer.
I actually had questions. Sorry, go ahead, Deepak. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just again, I know your vision is to help these underserved markets, and obviously it's for a great cause. Me and you were discussing before the call as well that you're looking to partner with these non-for-profit organizations. Maybe for our viewers, you can share which organizations you're targeting, who you're planning on working with, and how you're really starting to approach this outreach program that you're talking about.
Sure. So in terms of reaching out to NPOs or not-profit organizations, we definitely want to reach out to the seniors, anyone with disability, women who are single moms, working that extra job during COVID, someone who's lost their income, international students, individuals who are currently unemployed or have been significantly impacted by COVID in general. And really that's what kind of we're targeting, and not to mention new immigrants to Canada. So we're trying to cast a wide net to capture as many people as possible. And that's only because we want to be able to help as many people as possible during this tax season.
Right. No, that's great. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, so obviously COVID-19 has been like a huge for all of us. How has that impacted you in your tax season? How has that impacted you? I'm sure it's a bit different, but just your thoughts on that and how.
Well, great question. Thanks for that. Me personally, it's impacted the way how I do business and how I interact with people. Definitely, I would say that I'm cut from an older school cloth in the sense that I interacted with people on an in-person level. So I've definitely had to pivot to using and leveraging technology to connecting with people. So that's definitely a change. The work from home has been difficult. And challenging at the same time. It takes longer to get in rhythm, longer to focus, longer to get deliverables done. But unfortunately, what I can't say is that I've been impacted in any severe way which would change my economic situation. And for that, I'm very grateful. And being in that position of actually having something to give back to the community, I thought it would be very opportunistic to take this time and give back and disseminate the knowledge that I've acquired through my experience working in banking and in tax, and my experience with the in-depth tax program and the CPA program. So I hope I answered your question.
Yep.
And touched on how it's impacted me and what I'd like to do and to reduce the impact that it's had on other people.
Right. And just to piggyback off of that, one of the other questions I had for you is that obviously you're aiming to be more of a digital firm, right? So can you talk to us a little bit about how those interactions with your clients go, even for tax season, taking advantage of the cloud to upload documents? Maybe walk me through some of the processes that you've taken to help make your firm go digital, and what other initiatives are going to be taken to help facilitate that.
Sure. So I actually have a moonshot goal for the firm. I want to be the first firm in the GTA which is completely not-for-profit. We don't want to make any money, and we want to be the first digitally enabled boutique tax firm that offers client interactions strictly using and leveraging technology and being able to exchange documents, process, do compliance work, conduct meetings, all virtually. Of course, leveraging the technology that's in place right now. So that's my mission and vision for the firm. As that mission and vision continues to expand in my own mind, and that we outreach to as many people as possible, of course, that mandate is going to continue to evolve, and it's not static by any means. So, as a firm gets bigger, as our clientele get bigger, as their problems get bigger, we'll continue to pivot. But fundamentally, our DNA will still stay the same, that we're digitally enabled, we're ready for the future, we're accessible, we value diversity, we value how people want to interact and do business today, which is fundamentally different than it was even a year and a half ago. And I'm sure both you gentlemen can echo those points.
Absolutely. Syed, do you have any other questions?
Yeah. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about your educational background or your work background, and what led you to starting your own firm?
Great question. Thanks, gentlemen. Well, I have an undergrad in business and commerce. Obviously, at that time, when I finished my undergrad, I thought it wasn't enough, so I decided to go get a few more letters beside my name and got a master's, an MBA focused in finance. Did a couple of stints in local financial institutions. Still decided that it wasn't enough, so went to go and finish off my CPA designation. Wanted to specialize in tax, so I just finished a 3-year specialization from the Institute of Chartered Professional Accountants in-depth tax program. So I'm well versed in complicated tax problems, and really I think it's the marriage of all of these skills that now I want to put to use to help other people.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Yeah, and that's what we do here too. This is why we started this podcast, right? And this and these episodes to educate others, so our visions in line with each other, and I hope our viewers can get some knowledge out of this, and reach out to you if they have any questions regarding taxes. Like, this is honestly great that you're doing this, and I believe there's no non-profit tax tax firms out there right now, so it's great.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and you know, if this episode of yours gains more traction and viewership for you, maybe what you can do, and we're jumping the gun a little bit, is compile maybe a list of questions from your own audience, and I'd be happy to come back and do a Q&A answering those questions. And if somebody has questions that they just want to drop off to you, I'd be happy to come on as a guest on a reoccurring basis, just to give you some tax updates. Anything that's of importance to your audience, and so that we can really get that message out there.
Absolutely, and that's perfect, because for the next 2 months, we're also planning on having weekly tax specials where we talk about the biggest issues in tax that are going on, what fundamental changes there are, and how our clients can prepare for it. So definitely it would be great to have you on a more recurring basis. Don't want to take up too much more of your time, but the last thing I guess we'll have for our viewers is, obviously tax season is very stressful for a lot of individuals, and especially more so this year. If you were to give one tip to someone prepping for tax season, what would it be?
Engage us early.
Engage early, right? Absolutely. So that's a sentiment I've heard a lot as well. A lot of people just kind of push tax season towards the end. They're like, let's kick the can down the street. We'll get it done eventually, and then you're left in a scramble. So, of course, as you're saying, it's always good to start early, get the advice of a professional, and ultimately, if you prepare a tax return that is guided with the right advice, then you're going to have more money in your pocket at the end of the day. So, again, thank you so much, Saurab, and we'll look forward to having you joining us again shortly.
Thanks,
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Cheers.
We'd like to give a special thanks for having Saurab on, and we're looking forward to bringing him on as a guest for future episodes of this recurring series. So with that being said, I want to move on to our main segment of today, and that's talking about employment expenses for working at home due to COVID-19. So as we introduced last week, we opened the floor to questions from our audience, and whatever questions they had, we promised to address them. So the overwhelming response was pertaining to these COVID-19 related work from home expenses and how those would affect your taxes. So with that being said, I just want to walk through briefly what kind of forms you'll actually have to fill out, what considerations there are, what expenses are deductible and non-deductible, and eligibility criteria. So let me just quickly share my screen and I'll walk you guys through a little bit more of the specifics. So give me 1 second.
Yeah, before we get into this share screen, I just wanted to put a little disclaimer for those of you streaming the podcast as audio. Be sure to check out the YouTube video of this podcast and this exclusive episode, just so you can follow along easier, as Deepak is sharing his screen, and it'll be easier for you to follow along. So the link will be in the description of the podcast, so be sure to check it out on YouTube. We hope that you can see the screen here, and back to you, Deepak. Take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Syed. So just going to go on T4044 guide that's on the CRA website. So this is specific to employment expenses. And what you're really focused on here is the T777S. So that pertains to the COVID related expenses. So let me just quickly go through some of these criteria. So let's start off with here. What's new for 2020? Home office expenses for working at home due to COVID-19. So you may be eligible to deduct home office expenses, workspace in the home expenses, office supplies, and certain phone expenses if you work from home in 2020 due to COVID-19, which I'm sure most of us have. So this is important information for us. For more information on how to deduct these, go to page 5. So let's just scroll down to page 5. Okay, employees working at home due to COVID-19. So just reading through this guide here. Who is eligible? So you're eligible to deduct home office expenses if you meet the following conditions. So you worked at home more than 50% of the time for a period of at least 4 consecutive weeks. So basically a month in 2020 due to COVID-19. Right? I don't think many people will have a problem again falling into this category because it's just 1 month, and especially for the month of March, there was almost a mandate for everyone to be working from home. So you would qualify under that, and the expenses were directly related to your work. However, you cannot deduct home office expenses if all of your expenses were or will be reimbursed by your employer. So that's a big caveat, because I think a lot of the big employers actually did reimburse their employees. So if that was the case for you, then you wouldn't qualify for this. So that's a big disclaimer. But assuming that they haven't paid, then you can start claiming some of these expenses. Moving down here, what can you claim? So you'll find below examples of eligible and non-eligible expenses. So let's run through some of the eligible ones. So eligible expenses include rent paid for a house or apartment where you live, electricity, heat, water, or the utilities portion of your condominium fees, home internet access fees, maintenance, supplies, employment use of a basic cell phone service plan, and long distance calls for employment purposes. And if you are an employee that's on a commission basis, you can also deduct additional expenses for property taxes, home insurance, and the lease of cell phone, computer, laptop, tablets, etc. The non-eligible expenses are really important here. So you cannot claim any of the following: capital cost allowance, mortgage interest. Mortgage interest is a big one, because I think a lot of people, even before the pandemic, they were trying to claim mortgage interest as part of their employment expenses. That was typically denied as well. So this is a big one to keep in mind. Principal mortgage payments, again, same thing. Home internet connections, capital expenses, office equipment, the monthly basic rate for a landline phone, telephone. You can see here it's more so personal use, right? So like a lot of people will try to deduct personal use devices like their cell phones, computers, laptops, and try to say those are employment expenses. That really doesn't fly with the CRA. So just be cognizant of that fact. And with that being said, when you are completing the T777S, the statement of employment expenses for working at home due to COVID-19, there are actually 2 options available to actually calculate your home office expenses. So within the eligible expenses that I've listed, this is how you're going to calculate it. So there's a temporary flat rate method, and there's the detailed method. So let's just walk through those very quickly here as well. They've actually provided examples as well. So this is actually really great information that you can just look at yourself. Again, it's guide T4044. So again, there's 40 pages here of employment expenses. We're not going to have time to go through all of these. So if this is something that interests you, feel free to give this a thorough read yourselves as well.
We'll put the link in the description. If you're interested, be sure to check it out.
Yeah, exactly. So option 1, the temporary flat rate method. So the CRA introduced the temporary flat rate method to calculate your home office expenses for 2020. If you use this method, your employer is not required to complete Form T2200S. That form actually, for employment expenses, your employer actually does have to fill out that Form T2200. Those are typical employment expenses. For COVID, you also actually have to get your employer to fill it out if you use the detailed method. But again, if you're using the temporary flat rate method, you don't have to do that. So I think that's basically what that's covering. If you are eligible, the eligibility criteria I mentioned on page 5 above, so we just went through that. You can claim $2 for each day that you work from home during the 4-week period, plus any other days that you work from home in 2020 due to COVID-19, up to a maximum of $400. So that's the critical part. Basically, your maximum is going to be capped at $400 regardless of the number of days you work at home. Okay, so that's something to definitely keep in mind, and enter the amount of your claim on line 9939 of your form on your tax return. So let's just look at the example here. We may as well just walk through one just for the convenience of our viewers. So Karen's office closed due to COVID-19. She worked from home full-time from March 16th to December 31st. So obviously most of the year here, she had to pay heating, electricity, but her employer reimbursed her for the purchase of paper and pencils. Those are the supplies that we were talking about earlier. She does meet the condition for claiming home office expenses that she worked more than 50% of the time for home for a period that was more than 4 consecutive weeks. So again, that's the eligibility criteria that I just mentioned. That means she's eligible to either use option 1 and claim $2 for each day, or option 2 if she goes that route. But assuming that she does go from option 1, the total number of days worked from home in 2020 due to COVID-19 is 188. Times the $2 flat rate, and that gives you $376, which is just under the $400 maximum limit. Okay. Then again, it tells you where exactly you have to enter these numbers. You have to complete option 1 on form T777S, showing $376 on that line. Enter that also on line 22900 on her tax return, and then you have to attach this form, the T777S, to her tax return as part of the submission. She's not required to keep any documents to support her claim, and her employer is not required to complete the form T2200S. So obviously there's a little bit more of an advantage here in the fact that you don't actually have to keep any of your receipts for the expenses you incurred, and you also don't have to get that form T2200S signed by your employer. So there's the convenience here. But again, her returns, her claims capped at $376. So now looking at option 2, if you choose to use the detailed method to calculate your home office expenses, you must meet all of the following conditions. So the eligibility criteria come into play again. You work more than 50% of the time from home for a period of at least 4 consecutive weeks in 2020 due to COVID. You have completed and signed form T2200S, Declaration of Conditions of Employment for working at home due to COVID-19, or form T2200. So again, option 1, you didn't have to get your employer to sign this. Option 2, they actually have to sign this. And then the other big thing here is that you actually have to have kept all of your supporting documents in case the CRA asks to claim them later. So while you're eligible to claim more expenses under the detailed method, there is more administrative work involved by having to get your employer to, first of all, sign it, and second of all, having to keep the supporting documents in place just in case the CRA does ask to look at it. And typically they will ask to look at it if it seems unreasonable or excessive in nature. So again, there is some subjectivity there, which you'll have to keep in mind. But again, there's more administrative work involved here. And then the deductible expenses, you can deduct home office expenses such as workspace in the home, office supplies, and other expenses during the period in which you work more than 50% of the time from home. And then again, this is repetitive here. Just scrolling down to go through more details about what supplies are, what sort of cell phone expenses are eligible and non-eligible, long distance calls, and then calculating your workspace and the home expenses. So again, this is a very thorough document. and it'll actually run through all the calculations for different scenarios. I know a lot of people are actually working in condos, for example. If you have a spouse that's also working from home, and you have like one condominium, then like you have to designate different rooms to different individuals, and apply a certain percentage towards the total expenses, right? Because like if you have renting, if you pay rent of like $2,000 a month, you can't claim $2,000 on each person's tax return, right? So like you'll actually have to be prorated based on the space. So again, we don't need to get too granular because that'll extend the segment a little bit longer than any of our viewers have probably paid attention to. So again, this document is available to you, and like I mentioned, this is the advantage of having our guest speaker. Saurab actually specializes in this sort of thing. So if you do have any specific questions, tax planning related or anything related to this, feel free to reach out to him and we can get you connected, and we can actually assist you in preparing these returns as well. So definitely, it may seem overwhelming to have a new form that's obviously brand new. No one's seen it before because it is COVID specific. So if it does help reduce the stress, we're there to walk you through every step of the way and make sure that you have all the documentation in place in order to file your taxes and get these deductions. With that being said, let me just quickly show our viewers the T2200 and the T2200S. So like I mentioned, this is the declaration of conditions of employment for working at home. So again, if you are using option 2, the detailed method, you would actually have to get your employer to fill this out. Obviously, it's nothing too complicated here, just some simple questions. Did the employee work from home? Did you or will you reimburse your employee? So again, like I mentioned, if they are reimbursing you, then you can't claim these expenses because you've already been reimbursed, right? So that has to be a criteria that's met. And was the amount included on the employee's T4 slip? So like if they are reimbursing you, is it included in your employment income? Yes, no. So these are sort of the questions that they'd have to answer. And typically, if we were living in a pre-COVID world, if you do have employment expenses that your employer is letting you deduct, then they'd actually have to fill out this form, right? And this is more so related to like travel. Do you have to be away from the city? So this is not something new. This has been around for a long time, so I'm not going to go into this. Again, if you have specific questions regarding this, then feel free to reach out. But really, the new addition this year is this T2200S, because almost every major employer has sent their employees to work from home for some period of time throughout 2020. So you'd likely have your employer having to sign this. Again, that is if you want to use the detailed method. That comes with a lot of administrative time and effort really to get your supporting documents in place. Alternatively, like I mentioned, you can go option 1, which is a flat rate method, and just take $2 per day that you work from home up to a maximum of $400. So your eligibility, your deductible expenses might be lower, but again, it's less of an administrative hassle. So again, there's pros and cons. If your actual expenses were like $500, $600, maybe you don't want to go through the hassle and just claim the $400. But if your employment expenses are actually creeping up much higher than that, then it does make sense to go into the detailed method option 2 if you do meet the criteria. So this is one of the main things that was questioned to us on the bottom line page. So we wanted to make sure that we did go through the forms in adequate detail. So if any of our viewers feel like there's anything missing or I can clarify anything, feel free to send me a message. And again, Saurab Mehta is also available. We'll provide links and his contact information as well, so you can reach out to him directly for more specific questions and more complex tax needs. But that ends our segment for claiming expenses for work from home due to COVID-19.
Yep, thank you, thank you, Deepak, for this great information, and I hope this helped our viewers. It definitely helped myself because I'm just getting into like filing my my taxes too. I'm sure all of us are, and it is COVID, challenging times. So it's a unique tax season to say the least, right? But yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed this exclusive. Once again, Saurab's information will be on your screen and in the description below. So be sure to check that out and reach out to him if you have any questions, or even reach out to us or Deepak specifically, and we'll be able to help you out for any of your tax needs, questions, or concerns. With that being said, that wraps up exclusive episode 3, and we look forward to continuing this series for the several weeks ahead as we go through tax seasons. Once again, thank you.
Absolutely, and keep the questions coming because that's going to drive our future episodes as well. The most common questions are going to be the ones that are addressed. So keep them coming if you want them answered, that's for sure.
Yep, drop them down in the comment below and we got you covered. Thank you, everyone.